Hey there, soccer fans, and welcome back to another episode of the Sons of a Pitch, an American soccer podcast. In tonight's episode, we have two big announcements. One that deals with our programming, and one is from one of our interview guests, professional soccer player Joe Fala. Our first professional soccer player interview for the Sons of a Pitch, hopefully first of many. As we continue through the MLS news, we got a hot minute looking at the Chicago Fire. New York City finally hires a new coach, and we break into Philadelphia Union's record signing. On the second half of the show, we talk USMNT, some of their hiring in their front office, as well as a listener question about Serginho Dest. And then we end the show with a lighthearted question as to what's the most embarrassing thing that has ever happened to you on the pitch. All this and more in tonight's episode of the Sons of a Pitch, an American soccer podcast. Well, hey everyone, Nick Pateras here once again for the Sons of a Pitch, an American Soccer podcast. I am joined by my good friend and fellow host, Mike Guglielmi, here to talk some soccer with you. Mike, I'm so glad you're feeling better. We missed you last week. You had to subject the listeners to like an hour straight of my voice. So I'm glad you're back.
Hey man, I'm glad to be back. It was, I think you did a fantastic job covering for me while I could not sleep in the middle of the night. I listened to it, and you did a fantastic job. Well done, sir.
Well, thank you. But, we do work better as a duo, and hopefully tonight's show is even better. We're actually going to continue some of our Super Draft conversation with one of the eligible players in the Super Draft. Joe Fala was kind enough to join us, so stay tuned for that interview coming up shortly. We do want to remind all of our fans and listeners, if you want to join our conversation, follow us along on social media at SOP Soccer on Twitter, at Sons of a Pitch Soccer on Facebook. www.sonsofapitchsoccer.com is the website, as well as email podcast@sonsofapitchsoccer.com. And I know, Mike, you're working on some new content both for swag and for video.
Absolutely. So first off with YouTube, check it out. We've got I posted up the CONCACAF Champions League preview and prediction piece there. So go check that out. We also have the swag piece, sonsofapitch.redbubble.com. Check that out. The sales keep rolling in. Anything we're looking to add some different artwork to the piece there on Redbubble, maybe different variations of the logo, et cetera, et cetera. If there's anything personalized that you want, let us know. We can do that as well. So if you're looking for a different background color, or you want something, Sons of a Pitch and maybe different logos, changing it up a little bit, let us know. Shoot us an email, podcast@sonsofapitchsoccer.com. or shoot us a direct message on Twitter at SOP Soccer. We can pretty much do anything. We can make something for you directly, and then you'll be able to purchase that once you're satisfied with what it looks like on the site. So make sure to check that out and help support this awesome sport of soccer here in the United States continue to grow by supporting our podcast.
We also want to recognize everyone who is already supporting our podcast, those of us who are following us on Twitter, engaging in our discussions, asking us questions. Thank you to Gentle Beard Soccer, the Minivan Dad Soccer Pod, CAS at Togaman, Brandon Phillips, Don Heron, On the Counter Podcast, covering Premier League, covering America, covering everything. On the Counter Podcast, check it out. Meta League Soccer, Joseph Samuelson, Matt Powell, Francisco Sheska. I think I'm pronouncing that. There's a lot of H's and exclamation points in there. He's one of the hosts of the On the Counter Pod, so check them out. And also, of course, thank you to Joe Fala for following us and for doing an interview, which we'll get to in just a second here. First, though, big programming announcement. We want to announce that we are now a part of the Big Heads Media Soccer Network. This is a great opportunity for our podcast to partner up with a great advertising company and a network of soccer and like-minded podcasts. It's a great opportunity for us because we're going to expand our audience. We can get new revenues to reinvest into our show. And as far as you, the listeners, we are going to be able to connect with a larger soccer community, provide you additional takes and opinions and looks at what's going on in local and international soccer. So make sure you check out Big Head Media Soccer Network. They have podcasts covering Premier League, the Italian League. There's even a podcast covering the Turkish Super League. This is how diverse they are. And I think we right now are one of 2 MLS-centric podcasts. So we are kind of kicking things off for them for American soccer. Support us, support them, and grow the conversation of American soccer. With that, speaking of conversations, Mike, we got the chance to speak with Joe Fala. You got to talk to him a little bit more than I did than just on the interview. Tell us a little bit about Joe. Tell us a little bit about his background, and then set this interview up for us. What can the listeners expect?
Yeah, so Joe Fala is from New Jersey, South Jersey, and was one of the eligible players for the Super Draft that you discussed in such great depth last week. He is the only Division III player that was eligible for the draft. So that was a pretty cool thing. I think that kind of stood out for Joe, is that, someone to take it from a lower division and still be eligible when you got all these D1 guys, D2, even just a few D2 guys in there. So really stood out in my eyes. We reached out to him and got in touch with him. He was willing to talk with us a little bit about his journey through the ranks of youth soccer all the way through college, becoming a Division III All-American, first-team All-American, a great accolade. So check out this clip here. It's about 10-15 minutes long. We talk with Joe and kind of understand a little bit of the way that soccer players come up through the system to get a shot in the MLS.
Well, that was our interview with Joe Fala, currently on trial with the Red Bulls of New York. And again, we really want to thank Joe for taking time out of his week. I mean, he's got his workout with Red Bulls this upcoming weekend, and he took the time out to sit down with us, to call in and do a little interview, to get his name out there a little bit, to help us promote our conversation on American soccer. Joe, we can't thank you enough. We appreciate you taking the time for us, wishing you nothing but the best. And we'd be remiss if we didn't give a shout out to his college team, the Ramapo Roadrunners. I didn't know there were Roadrunners in New Jersey, but apparently there's a whole team of them, Mike.
There you go.
As well as a shout out, as we said, FC Motown, the MPSL team that he spent a season with. So again, there's many paths to the MLS, many paths to the pro level in American soccer. And Joe is, Mike, what really stood out to me in the interview was, like you said, it was his work ethic. Like, he just kept at it. Like, how many guys, are playing at a D3 school saying, I'll never have a shot at the MLS, and then to go undrafted in the Super Draft. Like any one of us could have just stopped at any point in Joe's path, but he kept at it. That really stood out to me.
Absolutely, and that's what it takes, to get into the league. I mean, you've got guys that, they come up through these academy systems. They're well groomed. There are big things expected of them. They don't necessarily need or have the work ethic, and that's why a lot of them fail. And then you get guys like Joe who, just keep going, keep training, keep working. He obviously has the talent, and he just keeps working at it, keeps, perfecting and honing his skills to get that shot. And he has got that shot. Now it's just going to, come down to that work ethic and what he can do here in the preseason to really push forward and hopefully get a contract with the Red Bulls.
Right. So to all our listeners out there, go on Twitter, follow at joe-fala, JOEYFALA, shoot him a message, send, direct message him, tag him in one of your tweets, wish him best of luck and support. I mean, this is a guy who has given himself to the game, who's a big reason why the game continues to grow in the United States. So let Joe know that we're all thinking about him, that we're supporting him, and that we look forward to seeing him at Red Bull Arena in this upcoming season. And Mike, you heard him. He said he'd fly us out there if he ends up getting that starting role. So I'm going to hold him to that.
Absolutely.
Joe, we'll take care of the hotel accommodations. We'll fly ourselves out there if you take care of us when we get to the stadium. Like, Just remember, this was one of your first interviews, so take care of us, and we'll always be supporting you, Joe. Obviously, regardless of the tickets or anything like that, we're a big fan, and he's just like just a fun guy to hang out with too, man. Like just a down to earth guy, hard work, and just a really good person, good soccer player.
Absolutely. So with that, we have got to get moving on here. We got lots of soccer to talk about here. And let's start right out with kind of a new little segment here, the Hot Minute on the Chicago Fire, an update. Nick, tell us about the Chicago Fire and what is going on with the Chicago Fire right now.
Well, there's so much to tell, but not a lot to talk about, right? Like they had the 10th pick in the Super Draft and traded it to the Red Bulls for $100,000 in GAM. And then the 26th pick. So $100,000 in GAM, that can get you somebody. That's a decent chunk of change. So it looks like the Red Bulls, I mean, they had a target. It looks like, I forget who they selected with that 10th pick, but it looks like they had a targeted player, someone other than Joe Fala. And the Chicago Fire walk away with a nice chunk of change. But with their 26th pick, they end up taking Jonathan Jimenez, a defender, midfielder. He's listed as both. Probably more of a D mid then, coming out of the University of the Pacific. Personally, Mike, I hate the pick. I am not a fan. It goes against everything we discussed last week, or that I discussed last week, where I want someone from a big name program, someone who has won accolades and records, someone that was a routine starter for their college programs and has everything to develop into a star. We saw that with Joe, single season scoring record for his college, multiple All-American selections. He might not be coming from a big-time program, but as the only D3 player to be eligible for the Super Draft, I think that more than makes up for it. Whereas we've got Jonathan Jimenez, who started at Seton Hall, transferred to University of Pacific. Again, I don't know much about Pacific soccer program, but I think that's all you need to know. His biggest accolades was that he was the West Coast Conference second team. So I'm not a fan of it. And honestly, if you look at the next kind of 5 to 8 guys picked in the draft, they look like they were better picks than Jimenez. Now, I'm no MLS scout, and maybe he's going to prove me wrong. I hope he proves me wrong, both for the sake of the Chicago Fire and for the fans. But I don't think this is a good pick at all. And Mike, if you want to disagree with me, if you think the Fire need to bolster their defense, by all means, make the argument. But the Fire went on to pass on their pick in the 4th round, and since then they have no new signings. They only have 17 roster spots, Mike. They've got 6 more spots, I think, to fill. And then especially after they split with Marcelo, he's gone. They parted ways. Supposedly it was mutual. Supposedly it was amicable. But come on. Everyone who's out there has been in a relationship knows those mutuals parting the ways. It's never as mutual as you want to make it sound, or as it actually sounds. So that's the Fire minute. That's the hot minute with the Chicago Fire. I mean, what do you think, Mike? Are they doing anything right other than getting new ownership?
Not yet. As far as the draft pick goes, with that 10th pick, flipping it into GAM, I love it. Anytime you can get GAM out of a draft pick, do it. That's a huge pickup. 100K is a good amount of money. But just in perspective, Nicholas Benezet from TFC, who they had on loan and all that, they traded his rights over to Colorado. They weren't going to sign him. They didn't have the TAM for it, but only got 50K in GAM out of it. So Chicago's getting 100K in GAM, definitely worth it. As far as the pick goes, look, these MLS sides, I feel like there's not a ton of scouting on the college ranks and whatnot, because they're so split up between academy and second teams and third teams and under 23s, and then you've got the overseas guys that they're targeting. I think they kind of go through, they dig through a few players, kind of scout maybe 3 or 4 or 5 guys that they might think are going to be in the in the first round or second round. They get their heart stuck on a guy, and then they go with that. And they figured they liked Jimenez. Maybe they could get him in the 26th spot. And if not, they're still getting 100K in GAM. To me, it's not a bad move. I don't know anything about this kid, Jonathan Jimenez. As I don't know anything about any of the guys who were picked in the Super draft. The most I know about is Joe because he interviewed with us. I didn't take the time to really understand and get to know everybody's career. So overall, with that, I'm okay with it. Getting that 100K in GAM is big. Hopefully they can put that towards some signings. But as far as the signings go, dear God, please sign somebody. There's lots of rumors. Pizarro out there. They've got that Madic from Manchester United. There's lots of big rumors, but no action getting done. And Fires start training camp next week, as do all of the other MLS clubs who are not in the CONCACAF Champions League, and they can't even field an 18-man roster for opening day. That's a problem. I understand they're going through a lot of different their whole management is different. They're trying to find they're working into a new stadium and all that kind of stuff, and new coach and everything. But for God's sake, sign some guys, please. That's pretty much all I have.
So as a matter of perspective, with that 10th pick that the Red Bulls got from Chicago, they selected defender Patrick Segrist, who played, looks like a 4-year starter for Marquette, again as a defender. And guess where he's from, Mike? He is from Streamwood, Illinois, right around the corner from us. And Chicago, if they're looking for defenders, looking for local guys, looking for ways to kind of fill their stadium or feel good stories and all that, they passed on a top 10 pick defender from the Chicago area. So that's kind of a little juxtaposition there. And this guy had played, he was 2 years all Big East first team. And Big East, decent soccer conference, and his local high school club, Sockers FC, well-known club. When I was a kid, I think I played against them, and we did not fare so well. So if you want to look at comparison, here's a guy that the Fire could have had as a future starting defender for them.
That's it. The future don't need to worry about the future. The Fire need to worry about today. And that's all I have to say about it.
All right, that's fair. Well, let's move on to some other big news. We're sticking with the Eastern Conference, but we're moving over to the East Coast. New York City has finally hired a coach. Now they can go on and win the MLS Cup, right, Mike? They got their new coach.
Yeah, sure.
That's all it takes. They ended up hiring Ronny Delia, who's a Norwegian coach and player. Most recently was coaching for Vålerenga in Norway, but did have a few years coaching Celtic in Scotland, like the Celtic, the Champions League, the Scottish Premier League, all-time great club, Celtic. That's the pedigree that is coming over to the MLS now, Mike. Or am I making a much too broad statement with that?
I think you're probably making a little bit too broad of a statement. It was a couple of years with Celtic. I think we're close as far as bigger name coaches coming around. But you look at some of the openings that were there in Miami, New York, Chicago, some of your biggest markets, and there's no real big names there. Ronny Delia, not a big name. The guy that I can't, his name is escaping me now from Miami, but the guy from Monterey, decent player, but not, and decent coaching record, but not a huge name. Look, I think they're trending in the right direction. But as far as this guy goes, Ronny Delia, he's a coach from Norway. I mean, Bob Bradley coached in Norway, so maybe that'll translate well. I don't know. I think the most important thing this guy has to learn is can he teach a team how to play on a mini soccer field? If they can do that, then they're going to be good.
Always got to take a shot at the size of NYCFC's field, Mike, and I don't blame you. All right, let me put two scenarios out there for you, and let me know if you agree with these. So the way I look at the Ronny Delia hiring, if it's a glass full scenario, the optimist view here, this guy has high-level European experience, especially with Celtic and Champions League games played. He knows what it's like to win. He's got a taste of winning, so he has that experience. And it looks like he is ready to take all his prior experience and really make an impact with NYCFC. And, now's the time for him to shine. Glass half empty, pessimistic approach. The guy couldn't get it done at Celtic. NYCFC is just where Citigroup is going to dump him and see if he's worth moving back to Europe, or maybe his goal is just to develop a couple players so that they can sell it. That's kind of my glass half empty, pessimistic. Don't expect too much Citizen fans out there. Do you have a leaning either way with this signing?
I don't. I don't know enough about him. Other than just his basic experience, and it's New York City FC. It's a totally different beast. I mean, they've got the talent. They should be good, but they've never proven themselves in the playoffs. Is that what it comes down to for this guy? Is it about the playoffs and making a run? I mean, I'm not even talking about winning MLS Cup, but maybe just getting to MLS Cup or getting to the Eastern Conference Finals. But yeah, other than that, I don't really know too much about him. Let's see how it rolls out here in this upcoming season. It's getting close.
Well, let's transition then from NYCFC a little further down the coast, down to Philadelphia. Recently announced their record DP signing, or just their record signing in general. Obviously, is going to be a DP. They signed Jamiro Monteiro, the 26-year-old midfielder, to the DP contract. He was with the Union last year on loan from French club Metz, and it's reported that he had a $2 million transfer fee. $2 million is the record transfer fee for Philly? Man, they got to open up the pocketbooks over there, or their Apple wallets, or I don't know. Is pocketbooks an outdated phrase? Can I not say that anymore? Does everybody know what I'm talking about? Yeah, open up the account, man. $2 million is your record fee.
Yeah, that's interesting. $2 million. What was Bedoya? Was he just a free transfer? I mean, I feel like he would be more than $2 million. But wow, this is surprising.
They didn't snag Bedoya in the expansion draft.
What's that?
Bedoya in the expansion draft?
I don't think so. I can't remember how they brought him in, but again, they brought in a couple other decent players like Medunjanin. I guess they must have been free or damn near free. But look, Monteiro's a decent player. Is he worthy of a DP spot? I don't know. I mean, if you're trying to contend for MLS Cups, no. The answer is no. If you're contending to make the playoffs and just kind of get in, then yeah. So that's my biggest concern for Philly with this signing. But yeah, he's a decent player. He did well last season. Hopefully he'll continue to do well. He's 26. He's going to continue to grow. But we'll see.
So I dug a little deeper into the numbers because, yeah, I looked at it and like, okay, this guy had 22 starts, 26 total appearances, and only 4 goals and 9 assists. Is that worth the DP slot? So I looked a little bit more into the kind of player he is, and a lot of people are calling him a box-to-box midfielder, that he is there for his pressing ability when the Union are on the defensive side of things. So that is where his value is, at least that's what the Union believe his value to be. Also, like, we look at DPs usually are these big-name goal-scoring, goal-producing, playmaking type people. But if you looked at the goals scored last season, the Union, I think were like top 5, maybe top 6 in goals scored last season. So it's not as much of an issue for them to score. Let's see, they had 58 goals last season. The biggest team in the Eastern Conference was NYCFC with 63. And then Atlanta had 58 and Toronto had 57. So those are your top scoring clubs in the East last season. Meanwhile, in the West, obviously LAFC, 85 goals, ridiculous, total outlier, total exception. But then you had the Galaxy with 58 goals, and the Rapids actually ended up scoring 58, though they gave up 63. So it doesn't look like goal production was as big of a concern for the Philadelphia Union when they signed Monteiro to this DP deal. They still do have one more DP slot open, so they could mix it up a little bit there and bring in an offensive type player. But it looks like they're trying to make Monteiro like their version of Diego Chara over in Portland. Like the guy who's just the engine in the midfield, that pressing guy. He can break down the opposing attack, turn him over, and start the counter. At least that's how I think they're going to use him. It looks like that's how he played last season. Full disclosure, I didn't watch every Philadelphia Union game. I know that's a shocker. But it looks like if they can get that kind of production out of him, then it'll be a much better deal than kind of what we're criticizing for right now. Do you think he's the poor man's Diego Chara? Do you think like you get that production, it's a good DP deal? You talk about value a lot on the show, Mike.
Yeah, I would agree. If he if he can come in and disrupt the midfield and and play like that, as well as put together a little bit of some goals and assists in there, then yeah, it's a good value. Just again, when it comes to the DP spots, the value is looked differently. If that's a TAM signing, or if that's a guy who's on a $400,000 contract, who's not even touching TAM, then there's a different value associated with that than a DP spot, right? So I think it all just kind of boils down to the DP spot in my mind, and the fact that when you can sign guys who, they're going to make more money, but I mean, Philadelphia, you're one of the bigger markets. You should be able to spend some money. So hopefully he'll be able to, come through and put together a decent season. And I'd say, if he did kind of have a relatively close season like Diego Chara in Portland, then yeah, it would be a good signing for Philly. The key would be just let's get a little bit further in the playoffs next time.
And with that, we're going to take a quick break here and hear from our sponsors, the people who allow us to do what we do week in and week out. On the second half of the show, we're going to talk a little bit of the USMNT news. A new GM was hired, what that position entails, as well as we got a question from one of our listeners about Sergiño Dest, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of his recent decisions and his future. So just stay tuned for a word from our Sons of a Pitch sponsors. Well, welcome back, Sons of a Pitch fans, to the second half of tonight's episode. And again, thank you to our sponsors, Donovan Food Brokerage and Nice Premium Pure Iceland Spring Water. Second half of the show, we want to talk USMNT, United States Men's National Team. The senior team here in America had some big news announced recently regarding their front office. Brian McBride has been named as the general manager for the United States men's national team. This comes in part of a restructuring of the men's national team, big changes that saw Ernie Stewart be named the new sporting director, new coach, and a new direction in tactics and style and development under Greg Berhalter. All of this, as we know, coming after the embarrassment and utter failure for not qualifying for the 2018 World Cup. So we've been hearing a lot from the executives in U.S. soccer. There was a new president of U.S. soccer, a whole new campaign. Tons of candidates came out for it, players, executives, people in the business alike. So there's a lot going on with U.S. soccer from an organizational and structural standpoint. But again, the latest news, Brian McBride, yes, that Brian McBride, former player, former national team striker, former World Cup roster for the U.S., former Chicago Fire, amongst other teams in MLS. He is now the general manager of the USMNT. Mike, when you heard the news, what were your initial thoughts?
I love it. I think it's a great hire. One of the biggest criticisms of the USMNT has been that they've just become soft. And Alexi Lalas, love him or hate him, he has some good points about the USMNT. And one of the biggest parts, and I agree with them, as far as I think that the team has just gotten soft over the past 10 years or so. You got a lot of guys who have come up through these academy systems who are just groomed from the time they're 12 years old. They're given everything, and they don't have the fight that's necessary inside CONCACAF. We're not talking about at the World Cup level. It's fine. You'll be fine there. It's the CONCACAF level, and that's where we need the most help. And Brian McBride, that guy is hard-nosed. He is a fighter. He's a strong work ethic type guy. I mean, the picture that I remember the most of Brian McBride is him walking off the field to get medical attention at the 2006 World Cup against Italy when he got just elbowed like crazy by Daniele De Rossi. At the time was one of the best central mids in the world at that time. And he just goes, he gets he's all bloodied up. He just gets wiped off and gets right back into the game. And that is that's the kind of the guy that I think USMNT needs. And the fact that he's going to be overseeing the coach and a big part of the USMNT. I love the hire. I am really excited about it. I think it's going to take the USMNT to the next level, especially if he can kind of bring the rest of the blood around the coaching staff and whatnot to be that kind of hard-nosed, go after it and fight through CONCACAF mentality. I think it'll be a great hire. What are your thoughts, Nick?
I'm a fan of it. I'm cautiously optimistic just because we know how everything with U.S. soccer's worked out, and there's a lot of people buzzing around Twitter or making comments or talking about how we were really pumped when Ernie Stewart, a former U.S. player, was selected as sporting director. But then again, it looks like Ernie has just kind of become just another mouthpiece for U.S. soccer, not so much instituting the change we needed. I don't think that's going to be the case with Brian McBride, but only time will tell. This guy as a player has played in Europe and in the MLS, so he knows that. He has 95 caps and 30 goals for the United States, along with a couple World Cup appearances, I believe. I mean, wasn't he part of the Strike Force, like that big MLS marketing World Cup crossover campaign, like him and Clint Mathis, like MLS Strike Force.
Yeah.
So, like, from the advertising perspective, the guy plays. But he is not going to let the USMNT suck. Like, I'm just going to put it blunt. He is not going to let the club that he literally bled for suck. So I think he is going to do a great job in keeping Berhalter and their coaching staff to task, and even the players to task to a certain extent. His particular job description as GM calls for Greg Berhalter to report directly to him. So that is going to be a dynamic we're going to have to keep a lookout for. The other big thing that McBride has in his role as GM is club relations. So working with the U.S. player pool's respective clubs to build good relations with them, to make sure the players are getting treated well, that they're not jeopardizing the health of their club season for international play, and just building good relations so players get released to go play for international play. Yes, see recently Atlanta United withholding Miles Robinson, Brad Guzan, and I forget the third player recently. And finally, and this is big for U.S. soccer fans, so U.S. soccer fans, you've complained, and rightly so, but now you got to give them a chance because they're addressing your complaints. Brian McBride's job is also recruiting. It is his job to go out and talk to dual nationals and get them to come play for the United States. It's his job to go talk to up-and-coming youth players and convince them to continue along that path and to make sure that they stay in the eye and the mind of the U.S. national senior team coaches. To me, those are huge tasks, and it's going to be hard for McBride to address the three biggest problems with U.S. soccer: the coaching and tactics, the recruiting, and the club relations. But if anyone can do it, he can. At least that's my quick take on it for our podcast purposes here.
Agreed. I'm excited about it. I think he fits the bill extremely well, and only time will tell with this. But good news for the USMNT, and I hope that everybody gives him just a few months to get settled in, because he needs to learn everything. He needs to learn all these guys and work with these guys. It's not going to happen overnight. So don't jump on him too quick, especially if, there's a couple bad losses here coming up in Nations League, or some friendlies, and then everybody's jumping down his throat and saying, fire Berhalter, fire McBride. Chill out. That's, I think, the biggest. Everything I say, I think I just need to prelude with the USMNT is just everybody chill out for a minute. But right. We'll see. We'll see.
So, quick Brian McBride story, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So McBride's from Arlington Heights. He's from the Chicago area here.
Okay.
Where does it say he played in high school? Played at Buffalo Grove High School. He's a local guy here. So I used to work for Johnny Rockets Fireworks out in Northwest Indiana. And by the way, if you're ever there, ask for John and tell him Nick sent you. Anyway, Johnny Rockets Fireworks, I was working with a guy and we're talking soccer. This was, back probably around the 2000 World Cup. I think that was that the team that McBride was on? Was it 2000?
2000.
No, I'm getting my years mixed up. This was the 02 World Cup.
Yeah.
So 02 World Cup, I'm working with a guy, older guy, just coming in, knows Johnny Rocket, helping him out. And he's like, "Oh, you like soccer? Do you know who Brian McBride is?" I go, "Yeah, I know who he is. Like, he's on the national team. Like, he played for the MLS. Yeah, I know McBride. Why?" He goes, "I went to high school with McBride. Like, I used to see him in the halls at high school. I used to say hi to him every now and then." I'm like, "Oh, that must be so cool." He's like, "No, it really wasn't. McBride was such a pretty boy in high school, and I think he still thinks he's a pretty boy now." And I lost it, man. So I don't know if that pretty boy stereotype about suburban soccer players still holds true, or if it at least doesn't hold true anymore for McBride after the career that he's had. But that was my 2 degrees of separation there from Brian McBride. It was one of my coworkers, knew him from high school.
Interesting. Okay, maybe we got to go find your old coworker and line up another interview. What do you say?
Oh, kind of like a tell-all, like a VH1 behind the scenes here. Like, what do you remember?
No. Get him to talk to McBride and say, "Hey, McBride, we need you on the show."
Yeah, I don't think, based on that comment about him being a pretty boy, I don't think they kept in touch.
Yeah, probably not.
But we'll see. Maybe McBride's on Twitter and we can reach out. But anyway, that's kind of the talk about what's going on with U.S. men's team from a large perspective. But we got a question from one of our regular listeners and fans, Michael Hobart, who wants to talk a little bit about Serginho Dest. And he writes in and he asks us, would love to hear your guys' take on Dest's decision to play for the U.S. instead of the Netherlands. Also, his decision to leave Ajax camp in Qatar while Jesse Marsch is staying in the Middle East with Salzburg. Any implications for the U.S. involvement in the World Cup in Qatar, assuming they qualify? Now, we always have to add that, right? Assuming they qualify. And then keep up the good work, guys. So thank you, Michael. Appreciate the compliment and appreciate the question. And listeners, feel free to shoot us a message or tweet at us at SOP Soccer or email us podcast@sonsofapitchsoccer.com for any of your questions or comments that you want us to discuss on the show. But getting back to Michael's question here, Mike, Serginho Dest, why the U.S. and not the Netherlands?
I think that it was a smart decision.
Hey, Mike, I think I lost you again.
6 months.
Mike, I lost you.
Yeah, I'm back.
All right. So I'll ask the question again. So, Mike, Serginho Dest, why the U.S., not the Netherlands?
I think it just basically comes down to, in the Netherlands, the amount of talent and how direct everything is there. This guy could, he's an up-and-coming star. He picks the Netherlands, and he gets about 6 months, a year max, and doesn't have a great run in that year. And they've got somebody else to the next big thing coming up to take his spot. So, in the United States, I think there's a little bit more job security there for someone on the national team. And, I think he obviously had built good relationships with the United States and their management and their players. And I think that just kind of pushed him over the edge to know, hey, I've got time there. I'm an upcoming star. If I don't light the world on fire in the next 2 years, it's okay because I've still got a little bit of time that he probably wouldn't have had in Netherlands. So I like the decision. That's probably my best take on it. But overall, I'm all for it.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of pressure and a lot of vitriol that he was getting from people for considering the United States. So the fact that he picked the U.S. just shows like he's comfortable with us. He's comfortable with Berhalter's system, especially that playing out of the back. He likes to see that. Not saying that they wouldn't have done anything like that with the Dutch team, but for me, like he wants to play with Pulisic, Adams, Wea, Sargent. Like those are his guys. Like those are his boys. Like they're gonna go out and have a great time when they're at training camp or when they're off training camp, I guess, after hours. Maybe he's not going to have that as much with the Netherlands team. So to me, that was probably the biggest factor, is that he's just most comfortable here and he likes playing for the United States more than being on the team with the Netherlands. But as far as leaving Ajax camp, like who knows what sort of security they had or didn't have. And being an American in the Middle East, you're a target. You never know. Better safe than sorry. Part of me thinks that this is kind of like his way of like covering up an injury. I really hope that's not the case. That he's like, oh, well, I better just get home and be safe and not tell anyone about that hammy I pulled. I hope that's not the case, but you know, we're a soccer podcast. We can put our tinfoil hats on every now and then. But with Marsh staying in there, Marsh isn't, I guess, as big of a target. I don't know. I don't know how you can juxtapose Dest wanting to leave where Jesse Marsh is going to stay with Salzburg. Like, what do you think about that?
You know, I don't know. I don't think it has anything to do with, you know, like Dest being a bigger target or, you know, I think it's just the comfortability level of these guys. And you know, Marsh is, you know, he's a head coach, right? So there's more responsibility on his shoulders. It's a little bit harder to say, hey, guys, I gotta, you know, I can't come with you in a camp here. You know, whereas a player can, you know, has a little bit less responsibility there. That's really the only thing I can think of as far as, you know, obviously an American in the Middle East right now. Yeah, you've got a target on your head. I certainly wouldn't go over there right now. You know, so I don't know. As far as any implications for the U.S.'s involvement in the World Cup in 2022, I think that you know, tensions have seemed to calm down a little bit from where we were when these guys were leaving camps to where we are now, and hopefully that continues. And who knows what it will bring in 2022. But there's really no, you know, I can't say, you know, what would be 2 years from now. If it was exactly the way it is today, then yeah, it's going to have a big effect on these guys. I mean, it's going to cost a lot more in security. It's going to, if they even go, you know, who knows? It would be something very interesting should that come to play in 2022. But as of right now, I can't really think of anything. You know, it's just too far out, and that's not really my specialty.
Yeah, and the country of Qatar, it's really developing where a lot of Europeans are going and vacationing there. There's a lot of money that's being put into developments there. So I'm assuming they're going to have good security currently. Maybe they didn't have it for Ajax's camps, or at least not enough where Dest felt comfortable. I know they're going to have good security for the World Cup, but it wouldn't surprise me one bit if the United States Soccer Federation brings in additional security or consultants or something to assist FIFA and Qatar's Football Federation in getting all of that set up and getting everything ready for the World Cup. So we'll see how it plays out. But like we said, got to qualify first. Like Michael writes, assuming they qualify, got to qualify first, got to get there, and actually literally got to get there. Got to fly over to Qatar, and we'll take it one plane trip at a time, I suppose.
Absolutely.
So, Mike, with the last kind of couple minutes, I was listening to Chicago sports radio recently, and they asked the question of like, what's the most embarrassing thing that could happen to you in professional sports? Like, is it giving up a home run to the opposing pitcher? Would it be, you know, as we saw in Chicago, the double doink on a field goal attempt, or like a football player running into the wrong end zone, missing a dunk if you're an NBA player? So I wanted to ask you, just to have a little light conversation here. If you're a soccer player, what's the most embarrassing thing that you think could happen to you on the pitch? And I got a couple in mind, but I kind of want to hear what you have to say here. Like, what would embarrass you the most? What would just you run down the tunnel at the end of the game and never come back out?
That's a tough one, man. There's a lot of different things that that could cause some embarrassment. I think it has to be the goalkeepers who had let in just absolute howlers of own goals, like Sean Johnson of New York City, I believe it was last year, had a rough one. I think that's probably the most embarrassing type thing you can do is you're just getting a back pass and all of a sudden you miss it or you kick it into your own net by accident. That I think is probably the worst thing that can happen. Like nutmegs happen all the time. It's definitely embarrassing, but it's not hardcore effect on a game. So I think that's probably my best answer for that, or possibly even just like getting a throw in called back. Right. So if you go and you're going to take a throw in and you step over the line or something and the ref calls it, because half the time they don't even call it if you do. But if you do, they make a point out of you and then give it to the other team, that's pretty damn embarrassing too. So I think those are probably my two biggest embarrassing moments. What about you, Nick?
So you took my top two, like the goalie howlers, the Sean Johnson example, and then like flubbing a throw in. Like, how do you mess up a throw in? This is like you spend all of 10 minutes when you're 5-year-old playing for AYSO, like learning how to do throw-ins. Like, how do you screw that up? I guess the other thing I'm thinking too is just when you flop, when you dive so poorly that you get yellow carded for it, that you get the simulation card from the referee when you're trying to draw a penalty and you're just flopping around the box, and then you just watch the replays over and over, and it's just no contact, no one near you. As soon as you cross into the 18 and a defender looks at you, you just flop and fall all over the place trying to draw the penalty, and it's pretty clear what you're trying to do, and then you get that reputation as someone who dives. Like, to me, I think that's really embarrassing, and it's right up there with goalie howlers, that you just no contact, flopping down, and especially nowadays when there's 30 different cameras on you, as well as a million cell phones and TV sets watching you, and everyone can make these little viral videos of people flopping back and forth and like the quick replays forward and back, the boomerang videos and whatnot.
Yeah.
To me, that's extremely embarrassing if you get caught flopping that bad.
Yep. I have to agree with you there, Nick. That just look up a couple Neymar videos on YouTube and you'll see exactly what Nick is talking about.
Yeah. I'm trying to. Is there anyone in the MLS that you think has that kind of reputation as like someone who dives, someone who flops? Like, no one's coming to mind offhand for me, though. I remember Valeri had a really bad one, and we tweeted out the video of it this past season, where he like split the defenders, and like they didn't make a play on him, but yet he just went down.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think if there's anyone in MLS who's got that reputation, any sort of striker, but no one's coming to mind at the moment.
Yeah, not as far as current guys go. I will go out on a limb. My favorite player of all time, Sebastian Giovinco. He had a few dives. Not horrible ones. I mean, there's probably been a few horrible ones in there that I just have repressed. But I think he kind of had a little bit of a reputation of a diver, trying to get those free kicks because he was scoring 6 out of 8 of them. So of course he was trying to get those free kicks. But also then there's a couple guys in the past that I can remember. I can't remember their names offhand, but nobody right now that I would say is a clear diver. So if there's any listeners, if you've got anybody in mind that plays on your team or plays on a rival of your team, let us know. Shoot us a tweet and let us know, and we'll bring it up on the next episode.
A lot of people I just did a quick Google search, and a lot of videos show up for Joseph Martinez flopping and trying to draw a lot of fouls. Also, Zlatan got fined last season for diving. So, some of the big names, some of the guys out there who do it. It does happen in the MLS. So, yeah, fans, let us know what you think. Mike, bring us home, man.
Yeah, so just a couple little things I wanted to touch on here. One being DC United acquiring Peruvian midfielder Edison Flores from Monarcas in Liga MX. Big time signing for DC United to help Areola on the other wing and help that team get a little bit better since they lost a few guys. Other than that, thanks Nick for taking care of business last week. Listeners, thanks for your time, especially Joe Fala. Good luck to you, sir. Thanks for taking the time to interview with us. And listeners and sponsors, thank you. You are the reason we can continue to help grow this game of soccer. And we will talk to you all again next week.